Hey there folks, welcome to this little practice around the spine. We're going to spend a few minutes here getting the spine moving in all different directions, getting it ready for the rest of the day, whatever that looks like for us. We're going to need some kind of bolster or blanket or towel or series of those as a prop, and then we'll start on our backs over the top of the bolster or the props. The idea with this prop right now at the start here is we want this to be positioned so that our thoracic spine, our mid to upper spine, is getting some extension, okay? So take a seat, lie back on it. The idea as well is you want your head to be able to touch the ground above the prop. So if you find that your head is floating off the ground, then you might want to lower the bolster or find a prop that's a little bit thinner, or you would move a little bit further up on the bolster so that you are able to make contact with the ground. You can reach your arms up overhead, taking a few nice slow breaths here, in and out through the nose. If you'd like to take your legs out long, you can also do that. We're just going to start slowly here, just directing our breathing into the chest and then into the abdomen. Just a few breaths here. And that gets those intercostal spaces moving, which by default then gets the spaces where our ribs join our thoracic spine moving as well. Our costovertebral joints. You could stay here in stillness, or you could start to roll the head from side to side, just bringing a little bit of rotation into the cervical spine. And then after a moment doing that, we're going to come back to the middle, make our way up just for a moment to come to our side. Similar positioning with the bolster there. You'd like it just inferior to the shoulder, so your shoulder can be up over the top and hopefully touching the ground or close to it, okay? Same idea with the head. The head is touching the ground or very close to it. You might put a towel or an additional prop underneath it to make contact if it's floating off the ground, okay? You can reach the top arm over as well. If there's something to grab onto, I'm lucky enough to have the side of the platform here to grab onto. You can also just make a little contact with that and encourage a little bit more length through the shoulder girdle and through that side of the body. And that helps us to enhance this lateral flexion here of the spine. Just taking those breaths again. And again, you could stay here, or we could introduce a little bit of slow movement here towards a twist. So you might want to bring your knees in a little bit, and then from this position on the side, we keep the hips where they are, and we just try to open the chest to the ceiling or the sky. and you might come back and forth. So you might bring the top shoulder towards the front, and you might take it towards the back. Just nice and slow. A couple more of these. Then when you're ready to go to the other side, all you need to do is just push yourself up, do a little turn to face the other side. I'm just going to take this whole apparatus across to the other side of the mat just so that I can keep facing you. Set yourself up again. The shoulder is over the top of the prop. Head and shoulder on the ground, or positioning a prop there so that we can rest our head. And then reaching that top arm overhead as much as you can. If there's something for you to grab onto, go ahead and do that. And just see if you can gently increase the sensation in the side of the body here in the shoulder girdle. And again, you could stay still in this lateral flexion, or you could start to add in a little bit of rotation. If you're adding in the rotation, try to keep the hips relatively still and have the torso and the shoulders roll over the bolster or the prop. Keeping your breathing going nice and slow. Not necessarily tying our breathing to movement, but just keeping the breathing going. Just one or two more of these rotations if you're doing the rotations. And then we come up off the bolster. We can take our bolster off to the side for now, and then we're going to come down onto our front. So make yourself enough room, come on down, and we're going to start with some more rotation of the cervical spine here. You can have your arms out to the side or down by your sides. We're just going to keep our chest down, bring our cervical spine into extension, and then slowly look to one side and attempt to tap the chin on the shoulder or move the chin towards the shoulder. Okay, if there's no contact, that's okay. We're just heading in that direction. And then we come back through our extension and we go to the other side. Alternating between sides here, remembering to move the chin towards the shoulder rather than the shoulder towards the chin. One more of those on each side. Looks like we've lost the mountains this morning in the background. Bit of cloud coming in. Once you're back in the middle, we're just going to add in a little bit more extension. So whilst we kept our chest down on that first series of extension movements, what we're going to do now is incrementally add a little bit of our chest into the movement, and then we add more and more each time, okay? So come on up, lift the chest just a little bit, and lower. Do it again, lift the chest a little bit more, keeping the hands down for this first series, and lower. Lift on up into extension again, adding a little bit more of the chest, and lower. This next time, trying to come up as much as you can, keeping the lowest ribs in contact with the floor, but that's about it. And slowly lower. Now we do that again, we work it backwards, but this time we float our hands off the floor. So smaller movement, just lifting the top of the chest off the floor, and then we add in a little bit more each time. A little bit more. And then the next one, we lift as much as we can. Pause at the top. And slowly lower. Now we're going to add in the feet. Try to keep the legs as straight as possible. I like to think about lifting the backs of the knees as high off the floor as possible, and that keeps the legs straight usually. So float both legs up off the floor. You can have a little bit of distance between them if you like, and then bring the chest into the game as well. You can use your fingertips to start with to get a little bit more height, and then we're going to float them off the floor. We're just going to hold it here for 3 slow breaths. One more breath. Slowly bring it down to the ground on the exhalation. Pause there for a moment. And then the next time we do it, we're going to add in a little bit of rotation into the mix. When you're ready, we come on back, get the legs into play first, lift from the backs of the knees, lift to the torso second, float the hands, and then as we try to keep this same height, we're going to add in a little bit of rotation. So the shoulder that's closest to you right now, for me, I'm trying to lift it a little bit, and the other shoulder is coming down a little bit so that I can look behind my feet. And then I'm going to go to the other side. And I'm going to do 2 more of those on each side, so 3 repetitions. Last set, try to keep the shoulders away from the floor. When you make it back to the starting position again, come on down, take a moment. When you're ready, come on up to all fours. We're going to add in some movements of the spine here. We're going to start simple and then add a little bit of complexity to them as we go. Try to draw the whole front surface of your torso towards the floor, and at the same time keep the arms straight and then look forward. So our whole spine is coming into extension. And then we reverse that, we push the floor away, and we try to bring everything into flexion. Looking towards the knees, trying to arch the back up as much as possible. Repeat. As much extension as possible, arms are straight. As much flexion as possible. One more of each of those. And then come back to your zero position or your starting position. And then we're going to add in our lateral flexion. So same side, hip and shoulder, move towards one another. Pause there, and then switch. Two more of each of those. Last one. And back to your zero position. Now we're going to try and tie all of those ranges together. So starting in extension, we're going to come up through lateral flexion. So try to bring shoulder and hip towards one another, creating an arc between those two positions. Keep the arc going, and we make our way up through flexion. Trying to keep the arms straight the whole time. And then we go through the opposite side lateral flexion, continuing the arc. And we end up in extension again. Do that again. Keep the arc going. Trying to extract a little bit more range out of the movement this time. Last one in that same direction. Lateral flexion. To flexion. To opposite side lateral flexion. To extension. Once back in extension, switch the direction. Reverse. Lateral flexion. Flexion. Opposite side lateral flexion. And extension. Two more of those. Keeping the arms straight throughout this whole movement. The slower we go, the more work it is, so keep it nice and controlled. Last one that we're on. Take it back to extension the next time. Come back to neutral. Now we're going to add in a little bit of rotation. Before we do that though, if you want to take a moment to give your wrists a little roll, if they've been doing a lot of work for us, we'll give them a little roll. And then we come on back. You could use soft fists if that's preferable in this moment. And then we're going to open up, transfer weight to one hand, lift the other hand off the floor, and try to lift it up to the sky as much as we can. Trying to get as much rotation through the spine as possible. Lift it up, pause with it lifted. And then we thread it through underneath us as much as we can, but we don't let the shoulder come down just yet. Instead, we reverse, lift up, open up for a rotation again, really pushing the ground away with the opposite hand. Thread it through again. Again without touching down. Come on up for one more lift of that same hand. And then this time, as we thread it through, we're going to set the shoulder down and pause in a little rotation. Taking some nice deep breaths. You can use that grounded hand either to push into the floor a little bit more, or you can reach that on up to the sky or over behind you. There's a few options. After a few breaths there, come on back and we repeat on the opposite side. Transfer weight to the opposite hand, lift the other hand up. Pause at the top for a moment, and then we thread through. Hover the shoulder this first 2 touches. Lift back up, push the ground away, really try to press the floor and lift the opposite hand as much as possible. Thread through with a hover. Lift up one more time. And then this time, as we thread through, we can set the shoulder down. And that grounded hand we can use in a variety of ways, either pressing on the floor, lifting up, or reaching over behind us. Taking a few breaths here. And then slowly coming on out of that. And then we take a seat. Have your legs out in front of you at a nice angle. Getting the hips involved in this a little bit, but still we're going to try and focus on the spine as we do this as well, okay? We're going to turn towards one of the legs, you choose which, and then the opposite leg we fold towards, shoulder to knee. And that's going to give us a little bit of lateral flexion in the spine. We come up, change to the opposite leg, and tip. And we're going to do that. We're going to keep things moving, keep it dynamic. You could also add in hands or arms reaching up overhead if you'd like. That adds a little bit more weight to your torso and therefore a little bit more work for these muscles to have to do. So we're turning towards one leg, tipping in lateral flexion towards the other, and coming on up. Turning the opposite leg, tipping towards the knee, and coming on up. Keep going. Couple more of these. And then back to your seated position. We're just going to do a little bit more rotation with a little bit more load for the abdominal muscles. So come to a seat, your legs are out in front of you. Try to induce a little bit of flexion in the spine to start with. So if you find that your sacrum is feeling a little bit sensitive on the floor, place some kind of prop underneath it, a blanket or something, to give you a little bit more cushion. But the idea is we want more flexion in our spine to start with. Tip back a little bit so that you've got a bit of the load of gravity on you, and that's causing the abdominals to do their work, okay? Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna try and draw opposite shoulder to knee. Instead of making it about elbows, we're making it about shoulders. So try to draw opposite shoulder towards the knee. They're not gonna make contact here, that's not the point. We're just trying to move them in that direction. Try to keep the same inclination of your spine here. As you go from side to side. Keep going. Two more of each side. Really try to draw opposite shoulder to knee as much as you can. Keep the same inclination of the torso. Try to make sure that the spine is still in flexion on the last one. Once you come back to your starting position, take a moment, sit up. Then we're going to make our way all the way down to the ground, really trying to utilize the mobility of the spine that we've just been generating. So we're going to go slowly. You could have your legs bent or you could have them out straight in front of you. It's your choice. Reach the arms out in front and start with a little bit of flexion in the lumbar spine. Then we're going to try and keep that slow roll going all the way down, so that when we start to make contact with the floor, it is piece by piece by piece by piece. We're rolling everything all the way down. Okay? Then when you get there, bring the knees in, head for a little bit of a twist. You could stack the knees, or if you'd prefer, you can take the right leg over the left. That's when we're twisting to the left. I'm just taking a few breaths here. Slowly switching to the other side. After a few breaths there, unraveling, and then you might like to stay on your back for a few moments of stillness, or you might like to come up to a seated position, or maybe returning to your original position with a bolster or your blanket underneath your spine, and you might like to be in extension there. Finding your spot just for a few moments here, and then when you find your comfortable arrangement, you might like to close your eyes, you might like to keep them open, it's up to you. But we're just going to take a few moments here in stillness to just settle our breathing, to soothe it, to calm it down, in and out through the nose. Try to keep your attention focused on the movement of your breath. So you might notice the changing in expansion and relaxation of your torso. You might notice the movement of air through your nasopharynx. You might notice the movement of air around the edge of the nostrils. Pick one of those and just direct your attention to it. Keep your attention focused there just for a few minutes. If you notice your attention wandering off, just catch it, bring it back, place it back on that particular sensation that you picked. And then when you feel as though your breathing and your heart rate have soothed to a restful state, you can start to gradually reanimate the limbs, moving slowly. You might open your eyes if they were closed. If you do feel like you want some more time there in rest, please do take it. Thank you so much for joining me here in this practice, and I look forward to seeing you soon in the next one.